Over the last several months, I have mostly lost interest in politics. I've spent less time online. I've delved into my Judaism more fully. And I've begun to accept that much of this political theater is simply too absurd to merit attention. And yet, there has been no avoiding the most recent political developments. Firstly, the bullet that came this close to sending this country into what? Nobody knows. But what matters now is how we respond as people. Not because we actually control the destiny of this hopelessly corrupt political machine, but because how we respond to acts of political violence reflects our priorities as human beings. What do we want our country to be? How do we want conflict resolved? Over the past several years, my opinions of Donald Trump, the politician, have evolved substantially. Where I once envisioned a particular brand of nefariousness lurking behind Mr. Trump's every single political decision, I have begun to see more and more a fairly routine brand of conservatism. Someone whose right-leaning populism isn't a danger to democracy, but a very poignant reflection of a growing rift in our nation between populations who simply do not understand each other. Coastal urbanites and rural mainlanders. Classist modern aristocrats and blue-collar laborers. I've witnessed so many within my own region fail to empathize with a population who is being left behind. They are being pushed into irrelevance in pursuit of a brave new technocratic, gender-bending, attention-extracting, diversity-worshipping society. And they needed someone who would simply listen to them. Of course, whether Donald Trump can truly curb the aforementioned shifts in our society is a different matter. Will using some crass language in public really reverse the culture of tentative politeness that dwells in our era? Will deporting illegal immigrants change economic outcomes for former factory workers? If not, how can a more fair society develop given its current geographic distributions? Will deportation reduce crime? How many innocent people will be affected by such initiatives if they are put into action? I always imagined a leader who could navigate these concerns with prudent and compassionate deliberation would take a certain form. When Joe Biden, or more aptly, someone representing Joe Biden, stepped aside yesterday, they endorsed Kamala Harris, referring to a woman of great compassion, an attribute certainly foundational to a liberal moral conscience. Despite an ethically dubious prosecutorial background, the consensus from liberal Democrats will be that Kamala Harris is a more compassionate and ethical leader than Donald Trump, that she cares more about the people of this country than Donald Trump. After all, the only person Donald Trump could possibly care about is himself. I have my uncertainties with this conclusion on its own, but furthermore, I am uncertain that in the wake of Trump's shooting, the current brand of liberal sentiment is as compassionate as it claims to be.
Two of my mom's best friends came the following day and they wanted to go out to dinner, and they took me out to dinner for my birthday. They said something interesting. They were sitting in the back seat and they said, "Yes, we heard the news about Donald Trump at this rally. But then we saw the headlines, and they weren't the headlines we were hoping for."
Ah, damn it! The shooter just barely missed. This jesting darkness is no more compassionate in spirit than what stands in its opposition. For my own views of Donald Trump, the human being, certainly have not exactly been glowing endorsements. Very charismatic, yes. Quite funny. Direct, but brash, egotistical, and fundamentally untrustworthy. The kind of guy who gets everything he wants, promises the world, but is too morally enervated to find companions worth his loyalty. Women, business partners, golf partners. He cheats, he lies, he swindles, he swoons. He is a magnificent showman and a selfish crook. But he is also just a man. One human. One person with many a burden most will never know. Heck, most won't even approach imagining such burdens. One single person who for perhaps the first time ever came face to face with his own mortality. The great Donald J. Trump, president, billionaire, ladies' man, was all but a few inches away from death. This would not be a normal psychological experience for anyone, but especially not for one with an ego the size of Mr. Trump's. There is greatness to be discovered in humility, in vulnerability, in a recognition of one's own mortality, in knowing there was a man who laid down his life for his family just feet away from where you were lucky enough to escape by the flab of your earlobe. I listened to this man, our former president, whose voice I've heard so many times, speak on the floor of the Republican National Convention, and I heard something different. I heard someone slightly different.
He lost his life selflessly acting as a human shield to protect them from flying bullets. He went right over the top of them and was hit. What a fine man he was. I want to thank the fire department and the family for sending his helmet, his outfit, and it was just something, and they're going to do something very special when they get it, but we did something which cannot match what happened, not even close. But I am...
Of course, I could be deceived. It's just another act from the con man, right? He isn't really torn up about any of this because he's a malignant narcissist who only cares about himself. The brisk dismissal directly from the mouths of many liberals I know. Donald Trump surely can't feel remorse. Donald Trump surely can't feel inspired by sacrifice. Donald Trump surely can't change. I can't say I'm an expert in much of anything at this point in my life. But if there is one thing I am familiar with, it is transformation. 3 years ago, I was staunchly opposed to organized religion, every facet of it. It is dangerous, I thought. It's led to so much death and quarreling, so much violence, so much needless misunderstanding, all in the name of delusions. How could it be that this man, just 3 years later, is becoming a Jew? How can it be that the greatest of changes are possible? Well, psychedelics. Big shock there. But also something more familiar to most. Life. Life changes us. The most dramatic occasions in our lives have the power to transform seemingly unalterable qualities and beliefs. Dramatic occasions come in many forms, and while I myself have never been shot, I can only imagine the drama of such an occasion. Do we as liberals feel compassion for the plights of victims? Do we as liberals believe in the rehabilitation for the criminally convicted? One might say getting shot reserves some serious victim status. Is Donald Trump not worthy of compassion? Is he not capable of rehabilitation? Perhaps Kamala Harris has a thing or two to teach us about compassion and rehabilitation, considering she once blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man on death row. Perhaps Kamala Harris can teach me about transformation, considering my own spiritual awakening and connection with the divine was catalyzed by the very substances her former career made criminal. Or maybe I will choose to believe that the potential for transformation is present within everyone. Transformation is not always large, and it is certainly not immediate. I would know. With each Shema recitation and every red line of Torah, there is a gravity pulling me toward a man of my future. But it's not a transformation without its blemishes and tragic reversions. It's ongoing, this process of change, and it is thrust upon us in the most destabilizing of times. Nonetheless, as we approach this seemingly fateful election this November, it appears quite likely that this man, no matter what the Democrats do from here on out, with all of his baggage and complexity, will be our president once again. something that strikes fear and horror into the hearts of liberals across America. Yet for the first time ever, I can't help but find myself rooting for him. Not because I want him to be president, or because I align with him politically enough to cast a vote, or because I'm thrilled to welcome a convicted felon into our country's most esteemed edifice, but because I want to believe that people can change. I choose to believe that Donald Trump, in some small way, has already changed. And I choose to hope that just maybe we are looking at a different kind of leader. Not one without all his flaws, but someone connected just a little bit more to humanity and its pain. Someone who will choose his words more carefully and consider his actions more wisely. The hope of true wisdom finding Donald Trump is my distant liberal tear. But I must say, I hear its origin in his somber tone and his frail voice. I hear a human grappling with the same issues we are all forced to confront at some point. And so for liberals like myself, it is time to confront something on our own end. That it is better for former enemies to be redeemed than for your assessments of them to be forever vindicated. It is time for compassion. It is time for redemption. And it is time to start rooting for the man we will very likely once again call Mr. President.